This is the all-new 2013 Ford C-Max Hybrid. Now this is the first true American alternative to the Toyota Prius and Prius V. And in that I am also discounting the Honda Insight just a little bit, but more on that later. So let's hop in, let's take a look under the hood of Ford's all-new 47-mile-per-gallon Prius Fighter. Instead of copying the iconic shape of the Prius, like Chevy did with the Volt and like Honda did with the Insight, Ford's gone for something completely different. And because this is based on a Ford Focus platform, it should be no surprise that this looks sort of like a Focus meets crossover utility vehicle meets minivan. Of course, back here we have a hatchback, and we have a tall greenhouse, and we have a tall roofline as well. The C-Max in Europe is available with a conventional range of gasoline and diesel engines, but in America it's hybrid only. And a word about that hybrid technology before we dive in. There's this misconception somehow in the world that Ford licensed the hybrid technology from Toyota, but that's not really the case. Ford and Toyota were both co-developing their hybrid technologies. Toyota called this Synergy Drive, Ford just calls it a hybrid. The root of this is a power-splitting planetary gear set that uses two motors and an engine in one planetary gear set to split power between the electric motor and the engine, as well as generating power and powering the battery pack. Now, the concept was really designed by TRW in the 1960s, but both Ford and Toyota started really working on this in the 90s. Now, at some point, Ford and Toyota realized that their patents were probably going to conflict with one another. So, of course, they did the usual bevy of lawsuits back and forth, but then they did something interesting, and they cross-licensed each other's patents, not just related to the hybrid system, but to some other patents as well. The net result of this is that while Ford and Toyota's hybrid systems share some very similar design elements, and in fact they operate essentially the same way, they don't actually share any parts. So you won't find any Toyota transmission parts under the hood of a Ford hybrid, and you won't find any Ford parts under the hood of a Toyota hybrid. The heart of this hybrid system is both the 2-liter Atkinson cycle 141 horsepower engine as well as a 118 horsepower AC synchronous motor. The two put together don't exactly add 1 + 1 to 2, so the combined horsepower rating on this system is 188 horsepower, and I estimate a combined torque rating of about 200 pound-feet of torque, although Ford really doesn't specify. There's also a 1.4 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack back here in the cargo area, and that's upgraded to a 7.6 kilowatt-hour battery pack if you choose the plug-in version of the C-Max. So what makes this system different from the Honda Insight, and why am I not really calling the Honda Insight a good Prius competitor? Well, it's all about that under the hood area here. Because this system is essentially the same as the Toyota Prius, it behaves very much the same as the Toyota Prius. Whereas the Honda system, what they've really done is they've taken a regular old gasoline engine and a regular old transmission, and they insert a fairly large pancake motor in between the two. Now, there are no clutch packs involved, so that means that even when a Honda Civic or a Honda Insight is driving quote-unquote electric only, the engine is still spinning. It may not be consuming any gasoline, but that motor has to spin both the engine and the transmission in order to actually send power to the wheels. Because the C-Max wasn't designed as a dedicated hybrid vehicle like the Prius, there are a few compromises back here in the cargo area. The first thing you'll notice is this load floor is about 3 or 4 inches higher than the opening from the tailgate, and that's because the battery is located in this area. Now, the battery doesn't occupy the entire area. We do get a handy little storage compartment here under this initial cover, great for those Thanksgiving leftovers that you might have in the trunk. Now, the rear seats do fold completely flat, which is a great thing in this vehicle because you can push bags all the way forward from the trunk, and that's quite a bit handier than some of the vehicles where the seats don't fold completely flat with the load floor. Cargo space in the C-Max slots somewhere between the liftback Prius and the hatchback Prius V. This is the largest roller bag you can carry on a domestic flight, so you can see it fits back here quite easily. We were also able to fit 4 of these identical bags in the cargo area of this C-Max, both in this vertical position as well as this horizontal position. And in the horizontal position, you can still close the cargo cover or fit a few more bags up on top. Of course, there's an optional power liftgate in the C-Max, and as you can see, the hinges don't impact the cargo area, which is very nice. Overall, this area is finished quite nicely back here, and as far as hybrids go, especially compared to the Prius and Prius V, I'd give the C-Max a solid 9 out of 10 points in our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index. There's no denying that the interior of the Prius is a little bit funky. We have that center-mounted disco dash, we have those really hard plastics on the dashboard that are textured differently than I've seen in any other car, we have that center-mounted joystick shifter, and we have the usual Prius funky steering wheel. The C-Max, on the other hand, is a very normal car. Anybody can hop into this vehicle and they'd instantly know how to use the car. They'd know how to drive the car, they'd know how to turn the car on, they'd know how to use the radio, etc. All the controls are very standard Ford. We get a nice soft touch upper dash. The gauges are right behind the steering wheel where you'd expect them to be, and the steering wheel's even shared with the regular Ford Focus. The seating position in the C-Max is very crossover SUV-ish, and by that I mean very upright. These seats sit high off the floor, and that's versus something like a Toyota Prius. That makes these seats quite a bit more comfortable for me. It also gives me a slightly better view of the road than in something like the Toyota Prius. Our SE Tester doesn't have the power driver's seat, but our seat is still adjustable for height, and we still get a tilt telescoping steering wheel. Perhaps it's because of the C-Max's European origins, but there are a few nice touches in this interior versus your average run-of-the-mill Ford, as well as the Toyota Prius. We get vents that close with nice little knobbies on the dash. We also have this interesting array of vents here. I'm not sure if you can see this in the video, but we have these vents up here that point towards the face, and then we have another set of vents that point towards the leg, and those are independently openable and closable. We also have dual-zone climate control in the C-Max Standard. That's something that you can't get in the Prius. Like the front seats, the rear seating position is very upright in the C-Max, but these seat bottom cushions are a bit closer to the floor, as you can see. That means that for an adult, this might get a little bit tiring on the thighs, but it's probably suitable for most children. Now, this front seat is adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. As you can see, I still have about 3 or 4 inches of legroom left back here in the rear. I also have an incredible 3 or 4 inches of headroom left here in the rear, which is quite amazing, but it's all because of that very hatchback-like profile that the C-Max delivers. Even this center seat in the C-Max is very usable. I still have about 2 inches of headroom left here, and even though this seat cushion is incredibly firm in the middle seat, I could probably tolerate this for, an hour or two on a car trip because there's enough headroom and enough legroom back here even for this middle passenger. There's essentially no hump in the middle, which is a great thing as well. As with the Prius, things get a little bit cheaper in the rear, so you won't find soft touch plastic on these rear doors like you do on the front doors. That being said, the plastics choices and the parts choices in the C-Max definitely feel more premium than a Prius, and that includes these nice air vents in the center console. Since the C-Max doesn't have a spare tire, underneath the front passenger seat, you can see we have our can of Fix-A-Flat back here. You also find something interesting under that floor mat, which is a tiny little cargo cubby. Not really quite clear what you'd put under there, but there's one there if you need it. Let's take a quick look at the infotainment options in the C-Max. Our particular model is equipped with the My Ford Touch system, which integrates Sync, which you're probably familiar with, which is their Microsoft voice command system, with this large 8-inch color touchscreen LCD. Now, unlike many of the other products that have My Ford Touch, this car does not use touch buttons, so we actually have real physical buttons here in the dash. Lower in the dash, we have dual-zone climate control, which is standard on the C-Max, unlike the Toyota Prius, which only gets a single-zone climate control. You'll notice we also get a real shifter in the C-Max. This is also quite different from the Prius. Everything in this car, in fact, is very normal looking and very normal feeling, and this is the kind of car where you could get your grandmother in the car and she would know how to drive this car. Ford divides the My Ford Touch system into 4 quadrants, and we'll go over those one at a time. First up, here we have the phone section. As you can see, we have our typical phone interface. Of course, all this is voice commandable in the system, as it would be in the regular Sync system. Our particular C-Max has the optional navigation system, which is pretty typical for this space. So you can see we get a 2D map, we get a 3D map. We don't get topographical information like you would in something like BMW's iDrive. Over here we have our climate control system. As you saw before, we have physical buttons for the climate control system, but they're also mirrored here. We get a few more options. If you want to disable the dual zone climate control, then you can only do that in this screen. This climate control system is voice commandable as well, like most of the other elements in the Sync system. And then over here in the lower left, we have the infotainment options. We have AM, FM, and Sirius satellite radio. We have an in-dash CD player, and we have 2 USB ports in the center console. Now, this system, like the other My Ford Touch systems, is not capable of providing enough power to charge something like an iPad or any of those higher draw USB devices, but it does work quite well with my iPhone 4S as well as my iPod Nano. We also have an AV in, which is also in the center console, which allows you to play video games or other video out sources onto this screen here in the dash. Like the other My Ford Touch products, we have complete voice command over our iDevice or our USB music device, and that works very well and is fairly unique in this space, although Nissan has recently started doing this with their lower-end navigation systems, and Toyota has their Entune product. We haven't had much time to test Honda's new infotainment option in the new Honda Accord, but we're told that it operates very similarly. One major concern of my Ford Touch in the past has been both the speediness of its response and its tendency to crash frequently. Well, we did still notice that this system was a little bit sluggish at times. During our week with the C-Max, it didn't crash once, and that's a huge improvement really for Ford, because all the previous versions of my Ford Touch that we've tested have crashed fairly frequently during the week. A big part of the My Ford Touch system are these two 4-inch LCDs on either side of the speedometer. Now they're controlled by buttons on the steering wheel. So you can see we have a 4-way joystick with OK button on either side of the steering wheel. And this display on the left usually does climate, navigation, phone, and entertainment, but in our hybrid model it's been replaced by efficiency leaves. And if you're driving your C-Max efficiently, you can see the leaves grow. Instead of a tachometer or something like Toyota's regular power gauge, over here on the left side of the speedometer, we have something that's different in the Ford product, and something that I think is quite intuitive. Over here on the left, we get the power that the engine is putting out. You can see that's the larger circle there, and the smaller crescent here is the power that's being delivered by the electric motor. Over here we have the MPG gauge, and of course we have a little icon saying that we're in EV mode. Over here we get the battery that shows battery state, as well as what the battery is doing. So right now there's a down arrow because the battery is discharging. If it was charging, there'd be a little up arrow there on that other side. And if it was regenerating, there's a little spinning wheel here on the battery. The car will also help you be more efficient by grading your braking style. So as you can see right now, we're charging because we're braking. And because we braked slowly, we got a 99% energy return score. Now that doesn't mean that 99% of the energy that it took to stop the car was recaptured by the system. That's just sort of a general grade, because it's not possible to really recapture 100% of the energy that it took to get you up to a particular speed. So you can see right now we're in EV mode, and if we press on the gas a little bit more, the engine will start, and you can see that little white dial there is starting to go up. Compared to the Toyota Prius, the C-Max is a lot more aggressive about engaging EV mode, and it will use EV mode at a wider variety of speeds than the Prius. Although Ford claims that this car can only be in EV mode up to 62 miles an hour, we have been able to keep it in EV mode up to 70 miles an hour on the highway, and it's a lot easier to do that because you don't have to be as ginger on the throttle as you do in the Toyota Prius. The first thing you'll notice out on the road about the C-Max is how much quicker this is than the Prius. I'm talking about both the Prius liftback as well as the Prius V, and that's because we have a lot more power under the hood. 188 system horsepower, as we said, brings us to 60 in just over 7 seconds, and that compares very well to the Prius's 9 seconds and the Prius V's 9.5. What makes that 60 time even more surprising is how much the C-Max weighs. This car weighs 3,600 pounds, which makes it 600 pounds heavier than a regular Prius and about 300 pounds heavier than even a Prius V. In spite of that curb weight, the C-Max handles fairly well out on these winding California roads. Definitely better than any of the Priuses, or the Prii, I'm sorry, Toyota. And that's partially because of this extremely well-sorted chassis. Again, this is related to the World Focus, which is a very good thing to be related to, but also because we have much wider tires than any of the Prius models. So we have 225 width tires on this particular model, and most of the Priuses come equipped with 195s with optional 215s available. Maybe it's because of that extra curb weight, but the C-Max really handles broken pavement considerably better than the Insight or the Prius. Both of those models can get a little bit crashy over broken pavement, and that never seemed to happen to us during our time with this C-Max. That heavy curb weight does have a downside, however, and that's in the fuel economy. Even though this C-Max is rated for 47 city, 47 highway, and 47 miles per gallon combined, we were only able to average about 41 to 42 miles per gallon during our mixed driving tests over about 600 miles or so. Now, that's a decent amount less than the Prius, which averaged about 44, 45 miles per gallon, even though it was rated 50 miles per gallon combined by the EPA. Let's put those mile per gallon numbers into perspective, however, because if you drove a Prius or a C-Max or a Prius V for 15,000 miles a year, then the Prius would only cost you $50 to $70 less per year in fuel costs than the C-Max. Because when you're getting that many miles per gallon, the difference between 40 and 45 miles per gallon or 45 and 50 miles per gallon really doesn't affect your annual fuel costs that much. Now, the Prius V in our tests averaged between 37 and 40 miles per gallon, which means that it would cost about $100 a year or so more than this C-Max to commute that same 15,000 miles a year, and those numbers are at California's high $4 a gallon gas costs. Not only is the C-Max quite a bit peppier than the Prius out on the road, you can even get something approaching one-wheel peel if the road surface is just right in this car, but we also get something that's approaching real steering wheel feel. Now, that's not to say that there's a great deal of feel going on here, but the resistance is fairly nice, and it's much more pleasing to drive than a Prius. Toyota's hybrid system has long been the benchmark for hybrid system smoothness, and I'm talking about transitions between gasoline power, and gasoline-electric hybrid power. But this Ford C-Max, as well as the new Ford Fusion, really are the new benchmark for this segment, because as smooth and as transparent as the Lexus and Toyota systems are in those transitions, this Ford system manages to beat them, quite honestly. The transition between electric power when you first take off from a stoplight and having that gasoline engine kick in really is incredibly seamless. And because of the torque from this electric motor, when you floor the car and that engine kicks in later, it's also really hard to tell when that happens. The C-Max Hybrid starts at $25,200, and if you check all those option boxes, you can get this baby up to $32,500. While that may sound expensive, the C-Max slots neatly pricing-wise between the Prius liftback and the Prius V hatchback. That's really no surprise there, because this is trying to be the Goldilocks of hybrids and be everything to everyone in this hybrid market. Now, we do get a decent amount more cargo room in the back. We of course get that nicer interior, better electronics, and I think a more attractive exterior. Those things taken together, I would buy a C-Max over a Prius any day, even though it doesn't get as good a gas mileage as the Prius, both in the EPA scores and in the real world.